My daughter-in-law smiled at her colleague and said it right in front of me. Dylan's mother gets a little confused sometimes, so we handle the property matters for her. I was still holding the birthday cake I had just cut for my own granddaughter. I set the plate down, walked out to the back porch, and said nothing. What she did not know was that Gerald had left me something in a green tin box, and I had not opened it yet. If this kind of story speaks to you, subscribe and tell me where you are watching from. My name is Harper Rivera. I am 71 years old. I spent 34 years as a school librarian at Harlan County High School, right here in Tennessee. Retired 3 years ago. And I am not telling you this story because I want anyone's sympathy. I spent too long pretending everything was fine, and I think some of you know exactly what that costs. Gerald passed 4 years ago. Lung cancer, April diagnosis, gone by the first week of October. 6 months. People always say it went fast. They are right. But nobody tells you how slow every individual day inside those 6 months feels when you are the one living them. He was 69. He still had plans for that land. Things he talked about like they were next spring, not someday. The farm is 40 acres. Gerald's family land, 3 generations back. There is a small pond behind the south field that barely freezes in January, just enough that you hear it creak at night when the temperature drops. There is a row of apple trees along the east side that Gerald planted the first spring we moved there, back when we were young enough to think we were planting those trees for ourselves. I have always loved them more than I can properly say. After he was gone, Dylan and Isla offered to help manage the property. Dylan is our son, 44 now. Isla is his wife, 41, works in commercial real estate. At the time, I was 67 and alone on 40 acres, and their offer felt like something solid to hold on to. I was grateful. I said so out loud. Looking back, I think I was just so relieved that someone was offering to show up that I did not stop to ask what showing up was going to cost me. The signs were there. I can see them clearly now. Isla stopped saying my place and started saying the family property. Small thing, right? Except when it happens enough times, it starts to feel less like a phrase and more like a position she is staking out. She would bring her laptop to Sunday dinners, step out onto the porch mid-meal to take calls from people I had never heard of, come back in without saying a word about who it was. Dylan started looking at the floor whenever the subject of the land came up. Once I asked a direct question about the property tax payment, and Isla answered before Dylan had a chance to open his mouth. She said not to worry, they were handling everything. Said it the way you talk to someone who has already lost the thread of the conversation. I still woke up at 5:30 every morning, still made coffee in the same old percolator, still carried it out to the wicker chair Gerald found at a county fair in 1987. The left arm is a little loose. He kept saying he would fix it and never did. I sat in that chair every morning and watched the light come up over the south field, and some mornings, without meaning to, I would find myself looking at the fence line, expecting to see him walking it the way he always did before breakfast. Do you ever do that with someone you have lost? Look for them somewhere they used to be. I trusted Dylan and Isla. I want to be honest about that. I was not a foolish woman. 34 years as a librarian teaches you something about reading people, but grief changes your judgment in ways nobody prepares you for. You reach for steadiness wherever you can find it. They felt like steadiness, so I trusted them. And that trust was real, and that trust was what made all of it possible. Mila's 13th birthday party was held at the farmhouse on a Saturday afternoon in late September. Isla had invited around 20 guests, most of them her colleagues from the real estate office. By 2 in the afternoon, the place was full of people I had never met. I had baked Mila's favorite, lemon cake with white frosting, and I was at the kitchen table cutting slices when I heard Isla through the screen door, leading a group of guests out toward the south field. She was describing the acreage like she was showing a listing. The sight lines, the outbuildings, the pond. She called it a remarkable piece of land, called it a real asset. I stood there and kept cutting that cake and told myself it did not mean anything. A little while later, one of Isla's colleagues came up to me near the back porch. Pleasant woman, genuinely curious. She asked who I was. I started to answer, got about as far as opening my mouth when Isla materialized at my elbow. Isla told her I was Dylan's mother, the one who lived in the small house at the end of the drive. Then she dropped her voice just slightly, smiled the kind of smile that is not really a smile, and said I got a little confused sometimes, so they handled the property matters for me. The woman nodded slowly, said something soft and vague, and then they moved on. I was holding a plate of birthday cake I had just cut for my granddaughter. I stood there with that plate in my hands, and something in me went very quiet. Not sad, not angry, just still. I set the plate down and walked out to the back porch alone. What does a person do with the moment they realize someone has been building a story about them? In their own home, in front of strangers, with a smile, I stood there looking at Gerald's apple trees for a long time. The fruit was almost ready to come in. Branches heavy, light going gold the way it does in Tennessee at the end of September. I thought about the spring he planted those trees. How young we were. How little we knew about what we were actually playing things for. I found out later that Mila had been watching from across the room when it happened. She was 13, and she did not have the words for what she had seen, but she knew. I have thought about that more than I probably should. That night I was alone in the small house at the end of the drive. Yellow lamp in the corner, refrigerator humming. I made tea I did not want, and sat at the kitchen table and looked through the window at the main house, lights still on, faint sound of the end of the evening drifting down. That was Gerald's house. It had been my house, and I was sitting here looking at it through glass, like someone passing through. I got out an old spiral notebook, black cover, narrow lines, the kind I used for years at the library for inventory lists, sat with it for a while. Then I wrote one sentence and underlined it twice. I am not confused. I have never been confused. I slept badly. But before sunrise, lying in the dark with the house settling around me, something became clear. I needed to find Gerald's tin box. I had not opened it since the week after his funeral. Now I needed to know exactly what was in it. So the next morning, I waited until I heard Dylan's truck pull out of the gravel drive. Gave it another 10 minutes after that, just to be sure. Then I walked up to the main farmhouse with my own key, the one I have kept on the same ring since 1993, and I let myself in through the side door. The old wooden cabinet in the kitchen has been there since before Gerald was born. The tin box was on the top shelf, pushed back behind a stack of seed catalogs, right where he always kept it. It was heavier than I remembered. I carried it to the kitchen table and opened it. The first thing I found was the living trust Gerald set up in 2018. I had known about it the way you know about things you trust someone else to handle. I had never read it line by line. I read it line by line now. He had named me sole trustee. Dylan was the beneficiary, but only after my death. No one else had any legal authority over that land while I was living. Not to lease it, not to manage it, not to sign a single document in its name. No one? The second thing was two land lease agreements, both from a company called Ridgeline Partners, both signed within the past year. Both had my name at the bottom in handwriting that looked close to mine but was not mine. I sat with those 2 pages for a long time. I do not know how else to say this. I had never heard of Ridgeline Partners. I had never agreed to anything. I had never been asked. At the bottom of the box was a small envelope. Gerald had written on the front in his careful block print, "For Harper, in case I am not there to explain." I opened it slowly. He wrote that he knew his time was running short. He wrote that he had set up the trust specifically to protect the land for me, not for anyone else. and he wanted me to know that plainly. Near the end, he wrote, "This land is yours. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." I sat down on the kitchen floor with that letter and stayed there a while, not crying, just sitting with him for a minute, the way I used to when things felt too large to handle standing up. Have you ever found something that was left for you, that you needed years before you found it? I did not go to Dylan. I did not say a word to Isla. I did what I had done for 34 years when something needed to be found. I went to the right sources. I called May Hendricks that afternoon. We have known each other since we were girls. She has worked at the county recorder's office for 28 years. I told her what I had found. She was quiet for a moment, then said she would pull the filed records. She called me back within the hour. Her voice was careful and even. She said the signatures on those lease documents did not match my original notarized records in the county system. She told me I needed to come in and see it for myself. The next morning, I drove to see Joseph Adler. Joseph is the estate attorney who helped Gerald set up the trust, and he still had the original paperwork. He confirmed everything I had read. He was clear. No contract could be signed in the name of that trust without my written authorization. Then he made a call to the bank. What he found was a trust account opened 14 months ago, my name on it, with Isla listed as authorized signer. $95,000 had been deposited by Ridgeline Partners. I had never seen a single statement. I had never known the account existed. I drove home and opened that spiral notebook and wrote down every name, every date, every dollar. My hand did not shake once. That evening, Mila knocked on my door. Eyes red, like she had been carrying something heavy all day. She told me she had heard her parents arguing the night before. Dylan had known about the lease. She said, but Isla had told him I had already agreed to it and that the money would be split fairly. When Dylan asked why I had never mentioned receiving any payment, Isla said I was getting forgetful, and Dylan had not pushed further. He had not asked to see paperwork. He had not picked up the phone to call me and ask. He had let Isla do his thinking about me, and I had let them both do it for long enough. I listened to all of it without interrupting. After Mila left, I sat with it. I love my son. That is just true. But love does not mean I can look the other way. He had let someone speak for me and manage me and slowly shrink me down to a confused old woman in the little house at the end of the drive. And somewhere along the way, he had stopped noticing what that was doing to me. I kept thinking about a Sunday dinner last winter. Dylan laughing at something Isla said and then looking over at me right after, that quick little check to see if I had caught it. I had caught it. I still do not know what to do with that. Then Joseph called back with one more thing. Isla had submitted a request to extend the Ridgeline lease 10 additional years. If it went through, those 40 acres would be locked into a commercial agreement until Mila was nearly 25. Ridgeline planned a logistics warehouse on the property. The apple trees, the pond, all of it would be cleared. Gerald's land was going to become a parking lot and a loading dock. I thanked Joseph. I told him I needed everyone at the farm on Wednesday evening. In the kitchen. Bring everything. Wednesday, I drove back up to the main farmhouse and parked in the same spot I always used to park when I simply lived there. Joseph and May were already inside, folders on the table, coffee made. The kitchen smelled like old wood and something warm. I sat down and waited. Dylan and Isla arrived a few minutes after 6. Isla came in first, the way she always does, moving through the room like she already knows it belongs to her. She stopped when she saw Joseph and May, asked who they were. I did not answer. I reached into my bag, set the green tin box on the table, and opened the lid. Then I placed the documents down one at a time in the order I had written them in my notebook. The living trust, the 2 lease agreements, the bank statement from the account she controlled, May's side-by-side signature comparison from the county records. Joseph spoke first. Even voice, no heat in it. He explained that the agreements had been signed without authorization from the trustee, that the signatures did not match any notarized record of mine in the county system, and that the trust account had been opened and operated entirely without my knowledge or consent. Dylan picked up the signature comparison and looked at it for a long moment. Then he set it down and turned to Isla and asked her, quietly, whether she had actually asked his mother before any of this was done. Isla did not answer right away. She looked at the table. That silence went on long enough to become its own answer, and I watched my son to understand, not because I said anything, but because the woman he had trusted to tell him the truth had nothing to say. I spoke once. I told Dylan he did not have to decide anything tonight. But I needed him to know this was his father's land and mine, and I had never signed any of it away, and I was not confused, and I never had been. In the weeks after that, Joseph filed to void both lease agreements. Ridgeland Partners did not contest it. They wanted a quiet exit, more than they wanted 40 acres in Harlan County. The bank account was resolved. $95,000 came back to a trust account with my name as sole controller. I did not pursue criminal charges against Isla. I made that choice for Dylan and for Mila, not because what she did was acceptable. My condition was firm. Isla would have no role, formal or informal, in anything tied to this farm ever again. She signed him the reimbursement agreement. That was the end of her authority over anything with my name on it. Dylan and Isla moved into a rental in town. About a week later, on a Tuesday morning, my phone rang while I was sitting on the back porch. It was Dylan. He said he was sorry, said it plainly without a lot of words around it. I listened. I did not rush to fill the silence or tell him it was all fine, because it was not all fine yet, and he needed to sit with that. But I did not hang up either. I stayed on the line. Is that enough to rebuild something? I honestly do not know yet. But it is more than I had the week before. I moved back into the main farmhouse, put Gerald's photograph back on the kitchen shelf between the window and the old bread box where it had always been. First morning back, I made coffee at 5:30 and carried it out to the wicker chair and sat down and looked at the apple trees. Still there. All of them, heavy with the last of the fall fruit, branches moving a little in the morning wind, right where Gerald planted them 31 years ago. I used some of the recovered funds to build a small reading space near the orchard. 3 wooden benches, a little roof for shade, a short bookshelf with donated paperbacks. There is a sign at the entrance that reads Gerald's Garden. I did not make a ceremony of putting it up. Just went out one morning, hung it, and went back inside to make lunch. Every Wednesday, I hold a reading hour out there for older adults in the county. Some of them drive 20 minutes on back roads to get here. I do not advertise much. Word gets around in small places. It always does. Mila comes on weekends. Sometimes she helps me restock the shelf or pull weeds in the garden. Sometimes we just sit under the apple trees, and neither of us says much, and the quiet between us is easy. That is enough for me. That is more than enough, so. I am not telling you all of this because I want to be admired. I am telling you because 71 is not the year you stop taking up space. If someone has been slowly convincing you that you no longer need room of your own, I hope something in this story finds you. You already know the truth. You just have to be willing to open the tin box. What would you have done sitting in that truck, holding those documents, before walking back into that kitchen? Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and if this story stayed with you, subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.